Astrology, done well, cannot leave the human being behind. So many astrologers relate the person to the horoscope. If we relate the horoscope to the individual and how that individual is dealing with his or her reality, we have magic. Creative management of these basics free us to do our best. The moon is the reigning need of the entire life system. You're anticipating how a person will behave in order to fulfill that reigning need. The horoscope is showing you social patterns of development, illuminated in terms of a zodiacal sign. This brings the horoscope literally and figuratively to life. Oh, this is so important. It really and truly is. So this astrological study process really is an enrichment for us, the astrologer. The richness of you as an astrologer grows, grows, and grows the more you do this. I've been an astrologer for over 40 years. I've traveled through 26 countries. I have seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of astrologers. And I've been intrigued that they all have the same problem. Even those who have been in astrology many years. Number one, they have all these pieces and they don't know how to put them together. Number two, they have left the human being behind. Let me explain what that means. We don't want a laundry list of specific descriptions. We want to portray the development of a human being in relation to the environment. That's what it's about. In the Renaissance, painters showed dimension of human beings through what they call the chiaroscuro, which is the interplay of light and dark. It gives dimension. Today we're going to talk about the management of the basics we all know and how that gives us a sense of form and development through time. We know we're getting a picture of the heavens, but what is that picture showing us? A laundry list, as I said, of specifics? Or the process of relating to our parents, to our society, to our vocation, to our dreams? When a person walks into a room, you don't measure the distance from the right nostril to the duct of the sphenoidal air sinus to the occipital bund. All these technical measurements don't mean anything if you've got a nasal drip, because they're all working together problematically. If we can see the specifics we know and love working together within the logic of our society, we're being astrologers. We really are, and we can be helpful to people. Because if there's pressure in certain segments of those observations, by discussing them knowledgeably, we alleviate the pressure. So many astrologers relate the person to the horoscope. Think about that. If you relate the person to the horoscope, you're confining the person's development to what you know about astrology. I don't think that's fair. Can you do my horoscope? Can I do yours? If we reverse that process, the door's open. If we relate the horoscope to the individual and how that individual is dealing with his or her reality, we have magic, and all those specifics come together to reflect that reality. So your Mars in Virgo is different than somebody with Mars in Virgo in Calcutta, because the society is different. The interrelationship pressures are different. The dreams for development are different. They are sounding the same up to a point, but then there are chiaroscuro considerations, the interplay of light and dark. Oh, this is so important. It really and truly is. And I'm going to show you how to manage those specifics to achieve this miracle. It's not difficult. We don't want to forget the human being because we want to prove measurements. Each measurement has a nuance that is highly individual. And we don't want to forget you, me, the astrologer. We're involved. We truly are involved because we have to interpret, not remember a code book. And if we understand the principle, we can create light and dark, give form to existence. And that is why astrology, the horoscope, is portraiture. Portraiture. Long ago, a great Swiss seer named Paracelsus added something to our knowledge. Out of Mesopotamia, long before Paracelsus, we were taught about so what is above is so what is below. This is often attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. All of that is nice. It sets up an idea of what is above and below that is because of each other. In other words, what is below is because of what is above. But also what is above is because of what is whoops, let's say that again. What is above is because of what is below. And nobody talks about that. In other words, I can change my horoscope. I can alter my behavior to assist my development if I understand my development. I have certain kind of energy. I know how to adjust that if I understand it. Well, Paracelsus added something to this. He said those things that are without, outside, are the same things as are within. And so I internalize what is happening around me. How many times have you said, oh, my son is just like me? Or my daughter is just like her Aunt Helen? What has been put around us for influence and support, hopefully, is internalized and reflected out. Oh, too many words. What I'm saying to you is that what is above is linked to what is below, and what is without is linked to what is within. Notice that we have the crosshairs of orientation in time and space. These are the axes of the horoscope. I think that's kind of interesting because it orientates us to growth. And looking at it from your point of view, from the ascendant through the parents, carrying forward into relationship, up through our aspirations in society, which is our job, down to a new cycle, that's a lifetime. And it's all based on those angles. I enjoy these ideas. These ideas help me be an artist rather than a launderer. Our planetary symbols are not just keys to description. They are, in my opinion, symbols of needs that we have. I can tell you that you cannot go and ponder the sun alone. If you do that in the Gobi Desert, you'll burn your retina. So how do we appreciate the energy of the sun? We see it by reflections upon the moon. And when I really understood that, I was able to suggest that the moon is what is the driving force within reality on Earth experience, using the sun's energy. I can say unequivocally, and by the way, this is what DVD number 2 is going to be about, thoroughly, the moon. But I can share a little bit of it here. The moon is the reigning need of the entire life system. R-E-I-G-N-I-N-G, reigning need. When I have the moon in Aries, I need to be number one. Numero uno. There's no doubt about that. And if there's a problem there, it's because of other things, and we'll get to those things called aspects later. My point here is that when you walk into the room, you are showing the world a certain energy, your sun sign, but tied to, related with, the symbol of the moon. And they work together. The sun illuminates our system. It shines not only on the moon, but on Mercury, Venus, Mars, etc. So if I take this line of thought further, I can simply and dramatically assert that my Mercury is not my state of mind, but the way I need to think in order to be efficient. Mercury in Capricorn needs to hear the grass grow. Doesn't that tell you something? Don't you feel immediately the behaviors that you can anticipate from that in our society? Oh, I think so. Gee whiz. Annie over here needs to hear the grass grow. Does her employer realize that? Is she in the right job for her mind? Did her parents ever encourage that kind of thinking? Analytical thinking? Clear-cut, practical mental orientation? Because if that's been frustrated, there's a problem there. When the sun illuminates Venus in a particular sign, it's going to have an amount of light, if you will, that is focused on social relations. If you have Venus in Aquarius, you're going to be a bit off the wall, needing original people to help reflect your individuation. All of us are mirrors for other people. and they are mirrors for us. You feel the interrelationships? Inner, outer, above, below, chiaroscuro, dimensionality, entering the laundry list of specifics. How do these things stack up and work? You might be seeing me now as a very powerful person. You might see me as in a leadership position in astrology. I have Mars in Libra, which is kind of bland. Very often I end up being the leader of organizations that I'm in because I'm fair. Is that Libra? Because I'm not going to take advantage of anybody. Isn't that Libra? Pope John Paul II. My goodness alive. He had Mars in Libra. And he didn't make a major decision about all of these special topics that have been banging on the church's door for years and years and years. We run the risk of being too fair to stay out of trouble. All right. So what we're saying is that you need to know more about life than you need to know about astrology. Honest to gosh, that's true. And those of us in astrology who down deep realize that we don't know enough about the world in which we live, that sphere in which we are brought up. When we down deep realize we don't know enough about that to have a good conversation with somebody through astrology, what we do is we substitute stuff out of cookbooks. So this astrological study process really is an enrichment for us, the astrologer. And we reflect that back to the person we're serving. Fascinating, isn't it? And your minds are saying, why doesn't he finish that list of needs related to the planets? Well, I'm trying to leave some of it out so you can fill it in yourself and feel like you've made a discovery. Well, I'll give you a few more. Jupiter is the kind of reward we need. My Jupiter is in Capricorn, on my Sun in Capricorn. I need the recognition and reward of public appreciation. Clear as that. If it were arch and overemphasized, it would be, you do as I say in order to tell me who I am. Kind of hard to live with some people. But then remember, I was just talking about the Mars in Libra. Doesn't that ameliorate such a powerful Capricorn thrust? It does. I think I'm a nice dinner partner because of that. Okay. No more jesting. The Saturn factor is very complex. It represents not control, the way the ancients had it, but in our modern world of choice, free will, it represents necessary controls. Nothing wrong with control. If the banks of a river control its flow, it can be used for hydroelectric power. It keeps it from overflowing its banks and ruining settlements. Necessary controls. And where do we get them? We get them from parental structure in the beginning, Who's the first different person beside the mother that the child sees? It's the father. It extends to the teacher in our early schooling. It extends to our boss on the job. It extends to law, order. It extends to understanding our fit with society. And if that Saturn is jeopardized by aspect, the story can be told to us, then we have some problems to work out. And we have to know about those kinds of problems in development in order to be helpful through astrology to other people. If you have Saturn in Aquarius, the need for your ambition is going to be to help other people innovatively so that you're recognized for that. You are appreciated. You feel loved and significant. Isn't that wonderful? And if somebody is sitting with you and is all gnarled up and clutched, what are you going to do? You're going to open the door to that light of understanding. It might be the very first complementary, supportive situation in that person's life because the parents didn't give a damn. Oh, I'm getting way ahead of ourselves. But the basics can do that. Creative management of these basics that we're talking about here in our session together, creative management of these basics free us to do our best. And I hope that's important to you. Uranus is kind of a electrical intensification. It's a bzzz in the horoscope. That's all I need to tell you. If your Mercury has a relationship with Uranus, it's a bzzz to your nervous system and your mind. The way you think, need to think. Similarly with Neptune, you have this bloop, 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 bloop. And this Neptune factor can be bewildering. You can drown in it. It can also be, for the artist or artistic, a tremendous source of vision. And Pluto is perspective. Pluto, related to anything in our horoscope, is going to intensify its perspective. If Pluto is in strong aspect with your Mercury in Capricorn, as I used for an example earlier, that need to hear the grass grow is going to be so increased that perception is going to lead your life. You're looking at Pluto opposed Mercury. I am led by the need of perspective. And I work very, very hard to maneuver this perspective to be helpful in the individual's reality, the individual I'm serving through astrology. Now, I have gone through an awful lot here, a lot of specifics. And I think that I'm showing you the dynamic interrelationship of these considerations, not just to make a list of meanings. Clear? I hope so. It'll become clearer, ever, ever, ever clearer with every step we take in this series, I promise you. Now, we take these need symbols and we bring them down to earth. And we put them into the horoscope we merge them with these things we call houses, which are fields of experience in life. And our third DVD is going to be exclusively about that. But you can start to see that working. You can start to feel that working. One of the very first considerations is the blend of the sun and the moon. Over here we have energy in the sun, from the sun. Over here we have the reigning need, using the sun's energy. This moon reigning need is awesome. And DVD 2 is going to tell you all about it. But let's just take a few examples. You all know the signs of the zodiac. If we talk about Aries, we're going to talk about energy. Ego-orientated energy. And if we put that into a relationship with the moon that is also in Aries, we have one hell of a dose. If that moon is in Pisces, suddenly the life is being developed, enacted, and you have to feel that energy being given an idealistic or poetical touch. Now what happens when that goes on is like fire and water. Does the water boil with frustration? Or is the energy extinguished by the water? How do ego and emotions that are softer, perhaps, get together? You learn to feel this. First you learn it, not hard. Take the key words of the moon and keywords of the keywords of each sign and give it energy by the sun and reigning need focus by the moon, and you have it. If I have the moon in Capricorn, I need to make things happen. Don't doubt it for a minute. Take a look at Bobby Kennedy. Goes on and on. The examples are legion. But what if that moon in Capricorn is using a Piscean energy? To make things happen, my energy is going to enter the mode of idealism. Interesting, huh? Isn't it interesting that when we have the planets Sun and Mercury, or Sun and Venus, or Mercury and Venus, or all three in relation to each other, it is inescapable, this word idealization, idealism. It's extremely important for us to realize that idealism can get in the way of life. Think about that. So very, very often, and I've probably done 23,000 individual horoscope analyses in my career, I've had to say to a person, may I suggest that idealism has gotten in the way here of the practical orientation that you deem best for your development. How does it get in the way? And the client will say, whoa, It sure does. Did we ever think that idealization is a defense mechanism? Ooh. It was established because the parents didn't show in their mirror of the child's behavior that which will help the child grow. And so an ideal world is constructed. That probably is dysfunctional because it doesn't have the proper leadership. Now, getting ever more specific, a lot of astrologers, even those who have been in astrology for many years, do not know how to read aspects quickly in a horoscope. I hear them measuring. I'm going to teach you two things right now based upon this drawing that's coming up that are so simple. It baffles me why these principles are not being taught by other teachers. Let me show you this drawing. It is so very, very simple. This drawing, I'm going to explain the 2 points, will set you free. Number one, any planet or point in the horoscope at degree area X, whatever, will relate to any planet or point in degree area X of a sign in the same element, fire, air, water, or earth, by trine. That's all there is to the first point. You see 2 planets in relation to each other in the same element, within orb, a trine. Practice that. Let your mind savor the fact that you're always right. Second point, any planet or point in degree area X of a sign will relate to any other planet or point in degree area X in a sign of the same modality, cardinal, fixed, or mutable, always by square or opposition. You will always be right. Now, if you take this drawing and have it tattooed on your retina, I'd be delighted. If you take this drawing and put it on the ceiling above your bed, I'd be ever so delighted. If you put it on the front of your TV screen, oh, joy. If you put it on the inside windshield driver's side of your car, you're made in the shade. The point is, staring at this for a week, you will be free. And if you carry that around in your head, and somebody puts a horoscope in front of you and you go, oh my goodness, there's that square. Think of the time and awkwardness and insecurities you will avoid. Sounds so simple, doesn't it? Well, we're talking about creative management of basics. Fascinating. Now, there are special considerations that we learn that have extreme creative potential in their management. One is this phenomenon of retrogradation. My goodness. Retrogradation we call, well, the planets are moving backwards. Well, they're really not moving backwards. The planet is coming into a turn in its orbit, and the Earth is spinning and gets ahead of perception of the planet, seen against the backdrop of the zodiac. And so it looks like the planet is moving backwards as we're going forward. We don't need too technical a demonstration of that, but retrogradation seems to tell us something. And I pondered this for years. What is that message? Then I realized that when you have 3 or more retrograde planets, they're almost always in the same hemisphere. And this told me that a counterpoint was being established between the retrograde army of symbols and the direct army of symbols. And that one hemisphere was pushing our focus to another hemisphere, directly opposite. That's magical, and it works. And in a moment, I'll be showing you several cases of that. So, not all planets need to be in a hemisphere in order for that hemisphere to be emphasized. There can be 3 or 4 or 5 retrograde planets in one hemisphere that call attention to the opposite hemisphere. And these hemispheres are fascinating, just fascinating. When the orientation of focus of these specifics that now are coming alive in terms of needs, in terms of interaction with zones of experience through our development, the chiaroscuro that gives shape and dimension to being, to the process of becoming. What do we need to do with the energies we've got? Oh, the honest answer to that is the key to interpretation of the horoscope. If it's all emphasized in the south, which is above the horizon, think of Mussolini with his chin stuck out, il duce, during the Second World War, waiting for somebody to knock it off. These people are swept away by societal events in their upbringing, in their development, and potentially are taken advantage of and victimized. There's no doubt about it. It's a tough observation. Franz Kafka had everything above the horizon and to the east, which is, we'll get to in a minute, defensiveness. And it's all there between the 12th and the first house. And he was born into a family that was persecuted at the turn of the century, around 1900, a little bit later. They were vilified for being Jewish, being successful, being business people. And Kafka's horoscope showed this vulnerability, being pushed around by society, and he internalized it all, and he was his own worst enemy. He is well known to us because he wrote one of his great writings called Metamorphosis, Change, where his hero, changes overnight into a cockroach. Does that tell you the story? Nelson Mandela has a southern orientation as well. And look what society did to him. Put him into prison for 23 years because of his doctrines for society. Yet he emerged as president. Remember, the midheaven is the midpoint of the southern hemisphere. The eastern hemisphere orientation, if The retrograde planets force you from the west to the east, or they're all in the east. Talk about bringing all the generals back, all the armies. Come on back, help me out, I need defense. Gather around me, protect me. You'll never forget that image. Don't. Defensiveness. Somebody can walk into the room, just look at this from across the room. See that? See the Eastern orientation here? Clear as a bell. Want to see it again? See that? Can't miss it. Can't miss it. Can't miss it. That's the horoscope of Cher, the great singing actress. Third time. See that? All that? See that? Retrograde, retrograde, pum, pum. The moon doesn't count. Boom. Well, the point is, you say that to this great poised singing actress who has given so much to the world, and she's going to look at you and she's going to say, "You're right, dude. Nobody knows. I'm a hermit. And there's so much more." Our job now is not to analyze in depth. Our job is to show the creative management of specifics. All of these things are what I like to call gulps. G-U-L-P-S. Gulps. Gulps of synthesis. Our past president, George Bush, the son, has an Eastern orientation that doesn't quit. Look at his lifetime revealed to history of being defensive about sentence structure and international policy. That was the weakness people smelled about George Bush. Why did he need to be defensive? Why did Cher need to be set up with defenses with all her generals around her, so to speak? Well, her father split after she was born. George W. Bush had a very famous father who was well loved, quite a shadow to grow up in, etc., etc. If you like to cook, you probably have seen Emeril Lagasse's cooking show. He's quite the entertainer, this sort of ever weight-gaining, cherub-faced-like cook with his bam with the garlic. Well, he's got everything in the East except a little bit. And it tells you when you watch very carefully how sensitively withdrawn this man is privately. And if you've ever seen an interview with him, it's like pulling teeth. He's going through tons of filters of his early beginnings. But he made it. And the propulsion of all of this was his moon in Aries. Huh? Western orientation has got to be giving yourself to other people. Giving yourself away to other people. I give myself overflowingly to the public. Not me, but people with a Western orientation. There are people who take care of their aged parents until their parents are 98 and have sacrificed, the child has sacrificed marriage and sacrificed development personally and has hated every single moment of it. And they have this orientation that is colossal to attract love and appreciation because of early beginnings where that was stultified. You know people like that, and so do I. Public people, giving themselves to others. What is the reward for that? It's appreciation and love. And we're going to find that there are beautiful ways to see the cause of this hemisphere emphasis as well. And we have President Obama, who is terribly Western in his orientation in the hemisphere. Dan Rather, everybody's uncle. Jackie Robinson, the great baseball player, who was the first black civil rights athlete activist. Brooklyn Dodgers hired Jackie Robinson to sell more tickets with uproar and scandal, but he fooled them. He became a highly articulate gentleman for the cause. Everything was Aquarian, everything was West. And when these people walk into the room, you know it. You know it. I'm looking here at horoscopes. Here's Legacy, for example. See how everything is east? Notice the moon in Aries. It happens to be in the 6th house, which in advanced astrology you know has to be serving others. Here's Barack Obama. See the Western orientation? See the Western orientation over here? Oh, so clear. Here's Jackie Robinson. Look at this from a distance. You see this all retrograde here in the east? And there is everything focused on the descendant of Aquarius. Clear? The northern hemisphere, below the horizon, when that is emphasized, when all the behavioral faculties and need presses are focused through the planets in those zones of experience, those houses below the horizon, what we're having here is unfinished business in the early home life. Those are the words I've been using for 30 years. I've tested them through so many countries, through societies. How about young Justin Simpson, O.J. Simpson's son? Everything is focused to unfinished business in the early home life. How about Chastity Bono? Chastity Bono, Cher's daughter, who has just become a man. Just from across the room, you know all of this is retrograde. And here's the focus right here. And you'll learn the power of the 4th cusp to say mother. Remember we talked about Franz Kafka early? Now I can hold it up and I don't have to explain it. You see the hemisphere emphasis. Talked about Nelson Mandela earlier. I don't have to explain it. You see the emphasis above the horizon. You're ready to talk. You know that everything is going to be seasoned by the orientation of the hemisphere emphasis. It seasons everything. Along with retrogradation, we have a phenomenon called peregrination. It comes from Latin words meaning pilgrim, wandering. It doesn't have an aspect, a classical, but Ptolemaic. That means conjunction, sextile, square, trine, or opposition in the horoscope with another planet. It's a behavioral faculty that is wandering, that can get into trouble, that can be excessive. And the ancients had extreme rules to determine whether a planet was peregrine or not. I feel, in the interests of modernity and the structure of our life today, that we can not necessarily be confined by those strictures of judgment. I want to say that being classically, Ptolemaically unaspected means peregrine. And I've proved it. So, don't worry about exaltations and accidental dignities and the fall and all of that stuff. That's more on your laundry list. If you see something that's unaspected, you know it. And it will dominate the horoscope, i.e. behavior, in terms of the house it rules almost always. Sarah Palin walks into this room and she's got Jupiter peregrine ruling the 10th house. You know it. It's all enthusiasm, career. Sigmund Freud comes into your office and he's got Pluto, peregrine, ruling his ascendant. This is deep. Primal. Sexual, in his perspective. Russell Crowe, Mars peregrine. How many gladiator movies or killer movies is he going to make? He's got the moon in Aquarius. Someday he's going to get around to being quite the benefactor of society. Jackie Onassis, Jackie Kennedy Onassis, her Saturn retrograde. Her Saturn retrograde was peregrine. Now, Saturn retrograde is one of the great phenomenological discoveries. And this Saturn retrograde suggests that that father principle, which we referred to earlier in terms of Saturn and expression of its needs in terms of ever-growing ambition in the world, that Saturn retrograde suggests all too strongly that there's a problem there in the relationship dynamics, sometimes very hard to admit, relationship dynamics with the father. There's a legacy of inferiority feelings, often, taken on from that relationship or lack of it, because the father was either taken out of the picture early, one way or another, or was there and passive, or so tyrannical, any combination, so as not to have given the guidance of authoritative love. People want to defend that parent. And after the defenses are accepted, because you're not really incriminating, the person will say, yes, it's true. And this is a very, very important and deep concern that has to be worked on with your knowledge of interpersonal dynamics and family dynamics. But you know it from across the room. Powerful. Powerful. Just think now. You see the orientation of the midheaven IC, which is the time of your birth, and the ascendant, descendant, which is the location of your birth, articulated by zones of experience activated by sun energy, the reigning need of using that energy from the sun through the moon, and all the needs we need to get there. And phenomenological adjustments of the placements within the horoscope that establish extraordinary backdrops to development through hemisphere emphasis, and special conditions like peregrination. We find also that any planet in hard aspect, that means conjunction, square, opposition, Queen de Chile, 165 degrees. More on this in a later DVD. Any planet in a hard aspect within 2.5 degree orb with the nodal axis will reflect a tremendous influence of the mother. And very often you're going to find this with Saturn retrograde. It's like a seesaw on the playground. When one influence is up, the other one's down or gone. Think about that. Anytime Saturn, retrograde or not, is on or square to the nodal axis in tight orb, the mother runs the show. She takes over the father figure and his role. Now, I'm not just describing a situation. I'm keying your knowledge of these situations in life development. This is why you have to know a lot more about life than you do astrology. It's easy to see these keys. My God, you walk through that door, and I will be able to spot those keys because I am sensitive to how development affects the way you walk and talk and think and look and react to me and to other people. This is what happens when you study human behavior in relation to the symbolic guidelines of the horoscope. These planets form patterns. I mean, look at the patterns, the defensive patterns of the grand trine. Oh, what a lovely specific. Everybody thought in the past that it was a very beneficial thing. Well, it isn't. It just isn't. It's not meant to be, except in terms of defense. It's like having your castle here with a 3-sided moat, protecting it. Big walls. See that? Now, what that means is that nobody can get in and nobody can get out. And so when you have a closed circuit of self-sufficiency, you're working against relationship. And when I came out with those discoveries 20, 30 years ago, people thought it was crazy. But it has been proved so many thousands of times, I can't tell you. It is a beginning of deep, wonderful conversation. There's just no doubt about it. If it's in Earth, it's a closed circuit of practical self-sufficiency. I can do this and I don't need your help. Well, we limit our relationship, don't we? If it's in fire, Fidel Castro is a good example. I'm totally closed circuit, motivationally secure. I'll do it my way. Which cuts out relationship with the world, doesn't it? Prince Charles has a grand trine. Can't you feel it? His moon is on the nodal axis. If I say the word mother, he's going to say, that's absolutely brilliant. And what I'm showing you here now, as we get a little more advanced, is how these specifics, creatively managed, work extremely well to start a meaningful conversation. And the astrologer's objective, the astrologer's goal, is to speak meaningfully in conversation with clients, helpfully, relating their horoscope to their developmental experience. And I meant to mention that Prince Charles's horoscope shows that grand trine, that defensiveness, the self-containment, out of necessity, being a prince, waiting and waiting, now past 60 years old. It's in Earth. It's been extremely, eminently practical for him to be self-absorbed and private, etc. It's so hard for me as an artist analyst not to just roar into enormous deductions and depth, and I can't. I'm talking about management of the specifics, and we're doing a hell of a job. And don't forget that. Okay. When there's a grand trine in air, it's a perfect foil for the Saturn retrograde phenomenology. Think that through. It's a closed circuit of social or intellectual self-sufficiency. It's kind of an overcompensatory superiority complex. Think about that. Water, a closed circuit of emotional self-sufficiency. Oh my, I don't want to be heard again, so I will not relate to you. I don't have to explain these things, really, do I? When you start thinking of the person and not leave the person behind because you've got a juicy astrological measurement. Then there are little phenomenological things like anytime that Pluto is in hard aspect to the sun. I've come up with a phrase that is simply amazingly effective, but it sounds initially bizarre. But a person with Pluto square the sun, or conjunct the sun, or oppose the sun will understand it perfectly. You can smile and feel and know and say, there seems to be a blanket over your hand grenade. Think about that. Prince Charles would say, you're absolutely right. I have been stifled all my life. And I like Prince Charles, but I mean, I'm just saying to you, it's not a question of being critical here. That's what he has to live with and work through. Greta Garbo, I want to be alone. She really did. She was suppressed so much that's the only state of being she recognized when you really go in there and study Greta Garbo's beginning. Pluto square sun. Now when that Pluto's in relation to the moon, we have the emphasis on the mother. In the development, the mother is everything. This can get in the way. President Obama, Saturn retrograde, father was out of the picture, the seesaw went up with the mother sitting on high, Pluto, moon. Emily Dickinson, cold, frigid mother. And look at her own life. Never left the house. Wrote all this dry, painful, extremely cerebral that never saw the light of day in her lifetime. Maybe 2, I think, were published. Fascinating, isn't it? And the last special consideration I want to talk about today, before we show a few chart analyses, is simply mutual reception. The mutual reception factor is in when one planet is in the sign ruled by another planet, and that planet's in the sign. 2 planets are in the signs ruled by each other. I don't know how to say that properly, but you got the picture? I have the Uranus in Taurus, ruled by Venus, and Venus is in Aquarius. So that's mutual reception. And it's extremely powerful when both planets are also in aspect. And mine happened to be in quintile, which is a 72-degree aspect of creativity. But let's not get too far. Mutual reception, and I like this image, and a lot of people don't. The reason they don't is because it increases their laundry bill. But I say, think of wearing a white shirt into an Italian restaurant. You're attracting the sauce to your shirt, and the sauce is looking for the target. They work together somehow. And they're very powerful when they are also in aspect to each other, the 2 planets. Think about that. Now, we've covered a great deal here so far. In just over an hour, we've talked about so many of the specifics in the measurement world of astrology. And I've tried to show you fresh ways of bringing them together. So that one of the problems that astrologers have of knowing where to start is solved. You start with hemisphere emphasis. And within hemisphere emphasis, you establish the backdrop of the sun's energy activating the reigning need of the moon's sign. And the rest of the planets articulate their need energy profiles within zones of experience established by their position in the houses. That's how that works. After a while, you realize that you're looking at patterns of social development rather than a list of specific astrological measurements. That should make you feel very good. Now, I'd like to take a few of these horoscopes at random and just show you some basic orientations to the analysis that you would prepare in greater detail, of course, and how my eyes, using what we've discussed, orientate themselves ever so quickly into the preparation of the horoscope for analysis. You heard me mention Prince Charles a lot. November 14, 1948 in London at 9:14 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Now, Prince Charles has a grand emphasis here below the horizon, which is unfinished business in the early home. Very, very clear. The only thing above the horizon is Uranus and its retrograde. So you say, why? What is that unfinished business in the early home? And you know that it has to have some connection with the mother because the moon is on the nodal axis. It's very, very clear, isn't it? And that's corroborated by the fact that Neptune is conjunct Venus, ruler of the 4th, which we associate with the mother. And that's loaded right here. And he has defenses for that. Why? Why does anybody have a defense mechanism? Because they need it. And we have the moon in Taurus, trine Saturn in Virgo. Remember the chart, both in the Earth family. But here's an exception over the sign line with Jupiter, but still the majority element dominates, Earth. It's a practical self-sufficiency protection for him to preserve the status quo. Now, anytime the moon is in Taurus, the reigning need is to protect the status quo, the organization, no matter what it is. It's very difficult. The fear is to attract insecurity in the midst of any kind of change. That's the hardest moon position. Clear? Look at Celine Dion's horoscope here. March 30, 1968 in Charlemagne, Canada, 12:15 p.m. Notice how everything is above the horizon. Look, below the horizon, everything is retrograde. It's very, very strong. It's all linked to being from a full, big, fat French peasant family and being rescued by a father substitute, if you will, an older man, a theatrical agent, manager, and the rest is history for this woman who sings so beautifully. Interesting, isn't it? Notice the sun is in Aries and the moon is in Aries. Out of that whole family, I think there were 11 or 12 children, the need and the energy to be numero uno prevailed with the help of an older man. Here's Nelson Mandela's chart. These are chosen at random here, I assure you. And immediately we see above the horizon being victimized by society. Everything below the horizon is retrograde. It's just Uranus, but it's in its own sign, Aquarius. And that means, suggests, humanitarian emphasis of individuation. Uranus is bzzz, and that Uranus is bzzing in terms of humanitarian service, which you know is Aquarius. It can't be clearer. Now the moon here is in Scorpio, so the reigning need is to control. It's a very powerful, powerful need. Normal people, you know, it can range from anything from bitchiness, because they're so defensive about emotional sensitivity that they take the antithesis and exploit it to control their environment for their own protection. Well, he failed. They put him in jail. And he's working with emotional energy. And everything that Nelson Mandela talked about was the emotional outreach to even the enemies of the people, the whites. It goes on and on and on, but you see how that works. And for more advanced people, you'll note that Pluto is Oriental. Okay, more about that in a later DVD, but I wanted to show you how easy this stuff is to see. Oh, Adolf Hitler, a very familiar chart. While the moon is here, needs to get things done. Moon in Capricorn, through communications. Notice the conjunction with Jupiter in Capricorn, ruler of the third, and his Mein Kampf book, My Struggle. You know, sold almost as many copies as the Bible in its day. It was a very, very powerful statement to arouse the world in terms of Hitler's vision, which was seasoned with the occult. Notice the Pluto-Neptune phenomenological conjunction. That's off off our subject today. We have to stay into specifics of how he was thrown to the winds of change by all of this effort. A new organization. The energy of the sun and towers reflected on the moon and towers to bring about the Third Reich, the third kingdom. What were the first two kingdoms? People don't ask that question. The first one was Atlantis, his reference to the ideal archetype of the past, and the second was the Renaissance. He wanted the third. Notice how quickly, barely mentioning any astrology, we're following these guidelines to meaningful conversation and deduction. Notice how there's a combination here, above the horizon, but also to the west, giving himself away to other people. He did. For many, many people in Germany, he was a saint. Here's Mussolini's horoscope. The younger generation doesn't know who Mussolini was, really. These were contemporaneous people, Hitler and Mussolini, who was a fascist dictator of Italy, replacing the monarchy. But notice this energy of the sun in Leo, so powerful, and the moon in Gemini wanting to be accepted by everyone. Notice the thrust here is on the wings of fate, giving himself away to other people. For his ambition, notice that the Saturn is coming into conjunction here very strongly with the moon, insisting to be heard. Isn't that fascinating? Here's Kafka. I don't have to explain that, do I? But you see the defensiveness. You see the fateful victimization, anti-Semitic victimization. Being born in Prague, July 3, 1883. What a time, what a difficulty. Here's Chastity Bono, who's now transgendered daughter, son of Cher. Notice everything above the horizon except for Mars is retrograde, but that's calling all the attention to unfinished business in the early home life. And if the mother has problems, won't the child? We have to decide what they are and learn what they are. It's fascinating that the Sun in Pisces energy here, in opposition with the Moon in Virgo, which is to be correct, the need to be correct. Chastity Bono felt it would be correct for her to change gender. Now, you can't have your own personal opinions about these things. But notice that when you have Mars in Sagittarius, as Chastity Bono does, there's always the energy of opinionation. Who listens to what you have to say? The person who listens to you and what you have as an opinion of the world is the person you're attracted to. Understand that. That's your support mechanism. Powerful, isn't it? Just let you look at that. Here's Justin Simpson. Oh, what a shame, to have gone through what he did. Notice how it's all below the horizon and defensive. So I don't need as many words now to suggest to you unfinished business in the early home, defensiveness. But you have to ask yourself, why? Notice how the nodal axis at 15 of Pisces, mutable sign, remember our chart, just going to recall that. And the moon is in Gemini, both mutable signs, same degree area, boom, immediately a square. And it shows you right here in the aspect grid. Means mother. And so you say, dear Justin, thank you very much for coming to see me. We're going to have a good discussion together today. The horoscope has patterns that suggest much. And one of the key suggestions in your development is unfinished business in the early home life. And when we see something so pronounced, we look around for the cause. And the reference here is mother. Now, that's 2 or 3 sentences. You could add then, and the father was somehow dysfunctional. Notice that Saturn is retrograde. Isn't it interesting that Saturn also rules the 10th cusp, which is associated with the father, and that it's intensified by its conjunction with Uranus. There's much, much more, but this is creative management of the basics, isn't it? And aren't you pleased with what you've learned today? My goodness alive. Here's the Jackie Robinson story. Look at all that Aquarius, Sun in Aquarius. You know what that means. Moon in Aquarius, you know what that suggests. The reigning need. It's a new moon birth. See that? They're both in 11 degrees. And the ancients said that in a new moon birth, it is a dead moon. Now, you can't say that today. Well, I've got a dead moon. No. What they meant was it didn't have any light of its own. And so a new moon birth like this needs the support of somebody else. And then suddenly their potentials are ignited. Now notice that Venus rules the midheaven here and is conjunct Uranus in its own sign, called the final dispositor. Any planet in its own sign is called the final dispositor. And with Uranus ruling the 7th, public, with Venus, ruler of the 10th, that showed you that the baseball team that hired him was the person who believed in him and released all of this incredible individualistic civil service energy. Look at that. Look at that. Think in those terms. He needed to hear the grass grow. He did. He did something about it. And he did it with a gentleness and grace. The energy application, Mars and Pisces. Now, if he had Mars in Scorpio or Mars in Aries, his energy expression to the public would have been quite different. We wouldn't have a postage stamp with his face on it at this time. And wherever I go, when I'm lecturing in Moscow or Johannesburg, South Africa, these people know about Jackie Robinson because of what he stood for. Now you see, I'm going on and on and on here because the signals are leading me into respect for his individuation, which he gave to other people. See how much you're learning? All right, here's Mr. Obama's horoscope. Look, I mean, he just walked into the room. And the first thing you see is a Western orientation. He's giving himself away to other people. Why? Why? Well, there's Saturn retrograde phenomenology says he had to prove himself. Notice how Pluto, ruler of the 10th, a father corroboration point, as we're going to learn in the 3rd DVD, this Pluto is square the moon. the node is square the moon. Doesn't this tell you that the seesaw has the father down and out and the mother up and in? Tell me you see that. Okay, isn't that exciting? Mr. Obama, thank you for coming to see me today. We're going to have a good discussion. One of the patterns in this horoscope shows the extreme importance of the mother's influence. He's going to say, well, you're absolutely right. You know, I mean, my father was taken out of the picture very early on. So there it is. It's not a laundry list. It's a blend of light and dark. It's the chiaroscuro beginning of Barack Obama's extraordinary rise to the powerful position of President of the United States. Notice the monarchical energy he used. Oh, so much. Oh, so much. And notice that Neptune is square to his sun, which is the vision he implicitly talks about all the time. There's Emerald Lagasse. Bam! That's where he puts the garlic into the mix. What a fun horoscope, actually. You know, he owns a lot of restaurants. He's a heck of a businessman. And he's very, very shy about it all. Very defensive, a lot of things here. But notice how that Saturn here in Capricorn, final dispositor in its own sign, has prevailed over its square to the moon. But the moon was in Aries, is in Aries. So you have the press to be numero uno, using a kind of public energy, the sun in Libra, you can feel that. Oh, take me, love me, take care of me. I didn't get that in my early home. And the father situation here, the sun rules the 10th, and that sun is conjoined with Mars. See how it starts to emerge? I'm not giving you it all, I'm stopping so that you can see where we're going. Isn't that interesting? We're racing down this highway, and instead of saying to you, we're going to go up to this town 36 miles here to the northeast. You don't know what that means. You're worried that I might crack into something while I'm talking to you and driving. So I stop. And I say to you, look, we're going to continue on this road and go 36 miles to the northeast. That's over there. And when we get there, we're going to a heck of a great Italian restaurant. Okay? Now you're comfortable. Here's George W. Bush. Just look at that. Holy smokes. And we're back to share. See that? There's a very, very interesting point here. A mutual reception. Let me show you. See this Mercury in Taurus and Venus in Gemini? Now Venus rules Taurus and Mercury rules Gemini. So I've invented a way to do this, show this calligraphically, which is this. There's quite a heavy dose of idealization here in Cher, which comforts her in her hermit existence. Notice here we have another one. Saturn rules Capricorn holding the moon, and the moon rules Cancer holding Saturn. May I suggest, since the moon rules the ascendant and Saturn rules the 7th, share in your defensiveness, in your withdrawal, as extroverted a performer as you appear to be. How have you found yourself through other people? Let's start with your first husband, Sonny Bono. And immediately, in 2 sentences, guided by astrology, you're sharing a miracle with your client. And the reason that is so important with share, finding the self through others, exploring the signal of the mutual reception, is because she is so alone and so unique. And we see that as well. Her sun is Peregrine. It doesn't make a Ptolemaic aspect in her horoscope. And any time that the sun is Peregrine, that life energy doesn't quite know where to go. It becomes unique. In many people, it can be a touch of the eccentric. The world doesn't understand them, and they don't understand quite the world. And the same could be said, is said, for the moon Peregrine. These are highly individualized people. It's something to applaud and be supportive of when you talk about it with your client. But it's also something to be very, very aware of. Is it inviting relationship, or is it off-putting? So as we conclude this first time together, I want us to be pleased that we've been able to take the basics of astrology, most of them, and give them significance in relation to each other. And that is the chiaroscuro I talked about early in the Renaissance paintings, the depth of development rather than the superficiality of descriptions. And when you do this, you're not only serving your client well, you're serving yourself. Think how rich and how developed you become sharing such lives as you will attract so deeply. Thanks for being with me. Good luck.